Welcome to this TMDL presentation for Lake Anita. My name is Jim Hallmark, and I'm an environmental engineer with the lowaDNR. And I will be presenting the findings of our water quality improvement plan for Lake Anita. This presentation has been prepared and is being presented as part of the public review process for the Lake Anita TMDL. We are currently in a public notice period that will go through June 20th of 2022. If you have any comments or questions regarding this presentation and the water quality improvement plan, we must receive them by the end of the public review period, which again, as mentioned, will end on June 20th, 2022. You can send those comments directly to me at james.hallmark@dnr.iowa.gov. Also, if you would like a copy of the Water Quality Improvement Plan, a link to that document will be provided below this screen. Just a couple of housekeeping items related to terminology. The first one is impairment. We'll use that quite frequently. And impairment is defined is a weakened state or condition. It's in a diminished function. And when we're talking about a water body being impaired, there is something preventing it from meeting its designated function or expectations as outlined in the state's water quality standards. In the case of Lake Anita, the lake is impaired for algae, which is preventing it from meeting its designated function or expectation. The other two terms are TMDL, or Total Maximum Daily Load, and Water Quality Improvement Plan. These are two separate terms and have different meanings. However, sometimes these terms do get used interchangeably. So what is the Water Quality Improvement Plan? Well, a water quality improvement plan is a document, and that document contains the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, and includes other information such as an implementation plan. So the water quality improvement plan is a document, but the TMDL is an actual number that is calculated. So what does that really mean? Total maximum daily load, or TMDL, as identified or defined by the EPA, is a TMDL identifies the maximum amount of pollutant that a water body can assimilate while still meeting water quality standards, or while not being impaired. In other words, it still meets its intended functions and has no diminished capacity. Again, the TMDL is a number that we calculate. So here's an illustration to kind of maybe illustrate what a TMDL is. And here's a picture of a mule harnessed to a cart. And that's the system, mule harnessed to this cart. Under normal circumstances, the cart would be loaded up with boxes or product, other materials, and the mule would pull that around a village or to its intended destination. And it would function as expected. However, as seen in this picture, there comes a point in which the load placed on the cart results in an imbalance in the system, causing the mule to be lifted off the ground. In this instance, the system is impaired. It no longer functions as expected. This is certainly a case of diminished function, but all is not lost. The load on the cart can be offloaded, resulting in the mule's feet resting on the ground again and the system being restored to function as expected. We can compare this mule cart system to our lake or aquatic system. The mule and the cart represent our lake system, and the load or boxes on the cart represent a pollutant load. Just as with the mule cart system, our aquatic system can handle a certain amount of load or boxes and still function as expected. However, there comes a point when the load or the pollutant load or the load on the cart reaches a tipping point, resulting in the aquatic system not functioning as expected. There is too much pollution or load in the system, resulting in diminished function. And again, all is not lost. The pollutant load to the aquatic system can be reduced, allowing it to function as expected. With those a few items, here's an outline of what I intend to discuss in the remaining of this presentation. I'm going to discuss more in detail what is in the Water Quality Improvement Plan, and that would include a description of Lake Anita and its watershed, a water quality assessment, how we went about sampling and analyzing the water to determine if it is impaired or not, how we develop that TMDL, how we came up with the actual number, that mass of pollutant that can be discharged to the water body, in this case Lake Anita. And then last of all, an implementation plan. And this is going to be a pretty generic discussion where we have encouraged local involvement, where we discuss some strategies and practices, and then also as part of an implementation plan is continue monitoring of the water body. Okay, so this is a bathymetric map of Lake Anita. It is lake bottom contours, tells us the depth of the lake, and it's used frequently by fishermen and those trying to identify good spots to go fishing. The surface area of Lake Anita is 159 acres. And an acre is roughly the size of a football field as we measure it from the goal line to the goal line. So the surface area of Lake Anita is roughly the size of 159 football fields. The volume of Lake Anita is 2,100 acre feet. This would be like putting 1 foot of water over 2,100 acres or 2,100 football fields. Lake Anita is located in Cass County in southwest Iowa. The park is bordered on the north side by the city of Anita. And the lake is located within the Lake Anita State Park, which is owned and operated by the DNR. Lake Anita has a watershed of approximately 2,500 acres, which is outlined by this red line. So everything inside this red area is the Lake Anita watershed. Approximately 41% of the area in the watershed is in public lands. Other things that we look at are land use. Here is a graph or a figure showing the land uses within the Lake Anita watershed. A pasture, which is identified in this brown, and a grassland makes up approximately 60% of the land use in the watershed. The next closest land uses are forest and row crop at 16% and 12% respectively. And it's shown up here in the legend. The row crops are the hashed areas, and our forest would be these dark green areas. And again, you look at it and obviously tell that a large portion of the area is made up of pasture and other grasslands. Another thing that is important as we evaluate the watershed is looking at the topography or the slope distribution. The average slope of the watershed is 10.6%, and 44% of the watershed has a slope that ranges from between 8 to 15%, and 81% of the watershed has a slope greater than or equal to 5%. So we have some fairly steep lands within this particular watershed. To offer some perspective on that, and the slopes are critical when you're talking about erosion. And to offer some perspective on that, if you traveled through mountainous areas, say in the Cascade Range or the Rocky Mountains or other areas where you have steep terrain, you start seeing warning signs of steep grades. And when you're traveling down these grades, you begin, if you're in a car and you begin going downhill, you begin to pick up energy very quickly unless there's some type of energy dissipation, such as your brake. Well, the same thing happens in our watershed. When we have steep slopes, overland flow from the runoff goes downhill, and it begins to pick up energy. And as it does that, it picks up and carries soil particles, sediment with it, unless there's some way of slowing it down or breaking it, causing a break, just like in our cars. So with the assessment of Lake Anita, what is wrong with Lake Anita? First of all, as I mentioned earlier, that it is impaired for algae, which results from excess nutrients in the lake, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus. So how do we go about doing this assessment? Well, first of all, we're going to do our data collection. We're going to collect water samples and send them to the lab and analyze them. Now, this particular slide here with this disk area, this disk shown here is a sampling point for Lake Anita. A sampling point is typically located in the deepest part of the lake, close to the spillway. Samples are collected from year to year at the same spot. And then the samples are collected during the recreational season, which is March 15th to November 15th. But most are collected between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So, a DNR employee or DNR contract employee gets on a boat and they go out to these sampling locations. They collect their water samples and they send them back to the lab. And the lab does an analysis on them. We're looking at the chemical composition of the lake. We're looking for such things as phosphorus, nitrogen, chlorophyll A, which is a measure of algae, dissolved oxygen, E. coli, et cetera, et cetera. Another important monitoring and sampling parameter used in the assessment is water clarity. Now you might be able to go and out on a lake and look at the water. It might look green, or sometimes referred to as pea soup, which would indicate algae, or it might have a brown or reddish tint to it, which would indicate sediment. So we want to measure the clarity of the water, and this is done with a device called a Secchi disc. And you can see this little circular cylindrical item here, which is the Secchi disc. It's about 30 centimeters or approximately 12 inches in diameter, and it's painted black and white, alternating quadrants. The device is attached to a tape measure and lowered into the water. And when we can no longer see the device, the measurement is read, which becomes our Secchi depth. For Lake Anita, the Secchi average Secchi depth is approximately 0.7 meters or 2.3 feet. And for a comparison, East Okoboji Lake has a Secchi depth of roughly 5.5 feet. Or just under 2 meters. All right, so once we've collected our data and it's been analyzed, and we want to plot it on a graph. And in this particular graph, we are going to plot it by year on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, we're going to plot it by a parameter called the TSI, or Trophic State Index. Now, the Trophic State Index is a classification system which is designed to rate water bodies' amount of biological activity. So a higher Secchi depth would indicate a larger amount of biological activity, and a lower Secchi Trophic State Index would indicate a lower amount of biological activity. Now, I've also plotted here two lines, a red line and a blue line. The red line indicates our impairment limit. So as we measure all of our chlorophyll and our Secchi's depths, we would hope and want those TSI values to be less than 65. If they exceed that value of 65, then the water body, in this case Lake Anita, is placed on the impaired waters list. Now, this value of 63 is significant because once the water body is on that impaired list, in order to remove it, these TSI values have to be below a value of 63, and it can't just be 1 year. So it's monitored over an extended period of time to make sure that it's just not going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. That the trend is down, and that's going to hopefully stay down. But we need to, once it's impaired, to remove it, we need our TSI values to be below a value of 63. So we plot our data, and these are annual median TSI values. Then we can see here that for our chlorophyll values, we're consistently above that 65 value. We get down here into our more current years, and you got a couple below 65, a couple below 63, but then we're right back up. So as again, in order to remove it from the impaired waters list, those trophic state index values have to be below 63 for an extended period of time, and we're continuously, each year monitoring and watching those values. And also we can see here with our SECI depth, it's a little more inconsistent. We're below and kind of come up. We stay up and come back down and go back up. So we watch those values from year to year. All right, so this slide I already showed earlier. What is a TMDL? TMDL stands for total maximum daily load, and it's the maximum amount of a pollutant, a load, a mass that a water body can assimilate and still meet water quality standards, or still not being impaired, meet its intended functions and use as it's intended to be used. And as I talk about this TMDL, there's 4 areas of interest. First of all, there's our target. What is the pollutant we are trying to target and focus on? What do we want to reduce or eliminate within the system? I want to look at sources. What are the potential sources and possible sources of this pollutant? Then we're going to look at the equation. How do we actually calculate our TMDL? What is the math involved in calculating that value? And the last area that we want to look at is this allocation. Where is the pollutant being generated from a land use perspective, or how is it being generated from within those sources that we've discussed? And we'll talk about the sources here in a minute. So our target in this case is phosphorus. That is our pollutant of concern. Phosphorus is a needed nutrient for plant growth, and too much of it leads to algae growth. And algae is measured by chlorophyll. Algae is caused by excessive phosphorus. Also, phosphorus can be attached to sediments, which would create additional issues with our clarity. Remember, we talked about our SECI depth, and so if there's a high amount of sediment, the water might have that a chocolate milk look or a brown or reddish tint to it because of the sediment. But phosphorus can be attached to that sediment as well. And the phosphorus is transported by surface runoff and groundwater flow. It can be in that groundwater finding its way to the rivers and lakes. So our objective then is to reduce the sediment from runoff, to reduce the sediment runoff in the watershed to the lake. Now, there's two sources that we consider main sources of the pollutant. One is a point source and a non-point source. Now, our point sources are permitted facilities. So like a wastewater treatment plant, that would probably, to me, be one of the most common, is our wastewater treatment plants are permitted, and that would be a point source. Others could be some of our larger communities. I have a sanitary sewer or a stormwater sewer system that needs to be permitted as well. But the most common that we're going to encounter are these wastewater treatment plants. In this particular watershed, Lake Anita, we have no point sources, no permitted discharged facilities. So in our evaluation, we don't consider these point sources. Another potential source would be our non point sources. This would be non-permitted or unpermitted facilities. And the pollutants from these non-point sources can originate from many different locations, which could include our land application and runoff, a direct deposition of manure in streams, wildlife, excuse me, failing septic tanks, or even stream bank erosion. So these would be our non-point sources. So what is a TMDL? And just to summarize what we talked about, our target in this case, target pollutant is phosphorus. Our sources, we discussed point and non-point sources, but there are no point sources or no permitted facilities within this watershed, so we're focused solely on our non-point sources. And then we have our equation, the math. How did we come up with that actual TMDL, or total maximum daily load, number? So the TMDL equation is a pretty simple equation. It's our total maximum daily load is equal to the summation of our waste loads plus the summation of our load allocations plus some margin of safety or safety factor. We haven't discussed a waste load allocation or load allocation, so we'll kind of talk about them real briefly. But our waste load allocations are connected to or attributed to point sources. So our point sources are equal to our waste load allocations, and our non-point sources are equal to our load allocations. You remember these, the point sources are permitted facilities, and non-points are unpermitted facilities or unpermitted sources, and then a margin of safety. And through our evaluation, we were able to determine that the total maximum daily load for Lake Anita for phosphorus was 1,225 pounds of phosphorus per year. And so right off the bat, we're going to take 10% of this value as our margin of safety. So 122 pounds of phosphorus per year, we're going to set aside as our safety factor. We have no waste load or no point sources in the watershed, so that goes to zero. So all we're left with then is our load allocations, and that is determined by the difference of our total maximum daily load and our margin of safety, which leaves us roughly 1,100 pounds that can be allocated to our load allocations or non-point sources. Just kind of resummarizing and putting it into a chart here, or a table. The existing phosphorus loading to Lake Anita is currently approximately 2,600 pounds, 2,580 pounds. The allowable is 1,225, which says that we have to reduce this value by 53% in order to achieve the required goal of water quality standards for Lake Anita. And the last thing we wanted to talk about, the last area, was allocations. How is the phosphorus being allocated within each of these sources? And remember, we have no point sources. So how is the pollutants being allocated, or where is its point of origins within the system? How is it allocated? Just from a pie chart here, it was determined that through our analysis that the row crops contributed 37% of the existing phosphorus load, where pasture land was contributing another 30%, So most of it is coming from pasture land and row crop, with the remaining about 30% coming from other sources. The last thing we wanted to talk about real briefly was an implementation plan. We provide some general discussion here. We don't have anything specific, but some possible solutions, possible best management practices that could be implemented that would help improve water quality. We certainly want to encourage local participation and continue to monitor any improvements made within the watershed going into the future. So there's three practices, three best management practices. I guess just three different categories of best management practices. The first one is land management, which is a prevention. We want to keep the pollution at its source. We want to keep it confined and contained at the source. And this can provide benefits to both soil and water quality. And some of the examples of this land management or this prevention methods would include conservation till or no-till, cover crops, perennial strips, and manure and nutrient management plans. So here's an example of a no-till farming. This is a way of planting and growing crops without disturbing the soil through tillage, and by not disturbing the soil, it stays in a tight matrix, which helps reduce erosion. And also, by leaving crop residue from last year, it also helps prevent erosion and also improve soil health and increase the organic matter. Again, it all helps to keep the soils tight, which prevents erosion. Second best management practice is structural or mitigation. What do we do once the pollutant leaves the site? How can we prevent it from getting further downstream into Lake Anita? We want to trap it. And some of these examples would be riparian buffer strip, saturated buffer strip, a grassed waterway, or a sedimentation basin. And so when we were talking about coasting downhill and picking up speed and energy in a car, well, the same thing happens with the water as it goes downhill. It picks up energy and speed and velocity, and it picks up the sediment and carries it downstream. Well, we can put in a sedimentation basin or sediment basin. You know, you got your water coming down here at high velocities, and it enters the sedimentation basins, essentially breaking the water, reducing its energy and its velocity, which allows any sediment to settle out, settle to the bottom of the basin, and then the water then will flow over a weir and on downstream. And you know, our grass strips, buffer strips work the same way in a similar manner. They have vegetation, and water hits those buffer strips, and it reduces the energy, allowing the sediment to fall out. And our third one is in-lake remediation. You know, once it's there in the lake, what can we do to help resolve it? And some of the things there, fisheries management. I don't know that I don't think in Lake Anita that's going to issue. We can certainly stabilize shoreline stabilizations or even targeted dredging. So here's an example of the shoreline riprap armored to prevent additional erosion along the beaches. And so that's another practice that could be implemented. So, what's next is we continue to monitor and continue to encourage local involvement. That's when typically we find a greater amount of success, is when those that are in the watershed live, work, and recreate in it, participate in its success. And then one last thing is where needed, that the DNR can provide some technical assistance. So I want to thank you for listening to this presentation. As a reminder, the public comment period goes through June 20 of 2022. If you have any comments or questions regarding this presentation or the water quality improvement plan, please send those to me at my email, james.hallmark@dnr.iowa.gov, and I must receive those by June 20th of 2022. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.